This video is brought to you by Knowledge at the Australian School of Business. For more information, please visit knowledge.asb.unsw.edu.au.
When it comes to mergers, they don't get any bigger than this. Continental and United Airlines are to merge, forming the world's largest airline. It comes after years of turbulence in the aviation industry, with first of all fuel price rises, and then we have the global financial crisis, which caused business class passengers to desert the airlines in droves. Professor Murali Chandrashekaran from the Australian School of Business has spent over a decade analysing the aviation industry in the United States. He's now looking at the impact on mergers and acquisitions, on customer satisfaction and shareholder value. He's with me now. So Murali, starting off with the merger, what do you make of it?
Look, it was inevitable in many ways. If you look at the airline industry, you're looking at a huge overcapacity. Right? Too many seats chasing too few people. And whenever you have that sort of overcapacity, consolidation is inevitable. Look what happened with Delta and Northwest. They merged. There's pressures by low-cost carriers coming in, new source of competition, pressures on costs, oil prices increased, demand from consumers are down, 9/11 happened, recession's happening. So all these factors leading to consolidation is not surprising. And then 2 years ago, United was approached by Continental for them to buy United, but at the last minute they walked away from that. United was not in a great position in terms of its cash. And in the last couple of years, they've done a lot of things to improve their cash position. They've cut costs, they've slashed capacity, they've increased fees. So if you've ever flown in United recently, you're going to be charged fees for every extra bag that you get, and they're going to be very, very strict in enforcing that. But what that's led to is a large amount of cash that they've gathered. So now they're in a position to go to Continental and say, we'd like to buy you, and it's happened really fast in 2 years' time. So on the one hand, it was inevitable. On the other hand, are there going to be benefits from this merger? That's the real question. Benefits for whom? Well, if you look at the United webpage, they'll say, look, we have great benefits for customers. If you're willing to fly on United, now all of a sudden, you can fly to many more places because we've got all the routes that Continental used to have. So vast network at our disposal. We have greater financial capacity, so we can give more money towards the airline experience. Your service is going to be higher, and we're going to have lower prices as well because now we're this big behemoth of an organization, and it's going to help you. Shareholders, they're telling them lower costs because we're going to be synergizing, which means you're going to get more return on your investment. And then the other issue is that going to happen? Based on my research, I'm not sure that it's going to happen. A couple of things to keep in mind. The first issue is that it's likely that prices are going to go up. Fewer seats, lower capacity means airlines can charge higher prices. So it's unlikely that the prices are going to go down as much as United claims it is. The second thing in terms of customer service is perhaps more interesting from my perspective and from the perspective of marketing, academic like myself. Think about how United came to this position. They have come to this position to be able to buy Continental because they have worked hard to cut costs, increased fees, slashed seats and capacity. Not the three things that you think of when you say customer service, right? Now, there's no reason for them to change their implementation of a strategy that led them to this good position to be able to buy Continental and all of a sudden shift gears and say, we're going to go and do customer service. So it's unlikely that that's going to happen. But perhaps the most important aspect that my research suggests is the following. Whenever you have two different entities merging, and if you look at the American customer satisfaction scores, United Airlines typically is at the bottom of the largest airlines. Continental has much higher satisfaction. The two airlines, in terms of how they deliver customer satisfaction, is very different. Now you're taking two different kinds of customers, putting them together, and you have to service them with one service model. What that does, long term, that heterogeneity, that diversity in your customer portfolio actually hurts long-term shareholder value. And that's the focus of our research that we've just finished in the US airline industry.
Okay, so you seem to be saying there that there's very definitely a link between customer satisfaction and shareholder value in terms of, well, customers returning, basically where the customers think that they're getting good value for money. So is there actually a case, instead of a race for the bottom, which certainly United seems to have been doing recently, of saying if people actually get quality, then shareholder value will increase?
Absolutely. This is without doubt. Look, think about what the two different aspects of market engagement are. Firms are in the business to acquire customers. It's easier for you to acquire customers when other customers are talking for you and about you in a positive way. You want your customers to be apostles. It costs you nothing. So if I tell you, go to this restaurant for dinner tonight, it's free from the organization's point of view. Superior word of mouth happens only if a firm is delivering high levels of customer satisfaction. So high levels of customer satisfaction is going to imply less money to acquire new customers because of word of mouth. It also means that it's going to keep customers coming back to you. And it costs far less to keep customers and retain them as opposed to acquire them. So long term, you're going to be spending less money relative to a company that's focused on simply acquiring customers through advertising and promises of satisfaction without delivering satisfaction. So the long-term benefits are superior customer satisfaction, greater retention, lower customer turnover, more efficient spend of money, greater profits, leading to greater shareholder value. So that link has been established. The key, however, is what happens to the diversity in your customer portfolio. That's really the key that we focused on.
But again, there seems to be a real difference in this merger between Continental Airlines, where you may be paying a little bit more, but you get more value, whereas United Airlines, quite frankly, the tickets are a bit cheaper, but you don't expect as much service. Is there a real link there between what people perceive the value to be and how happy they're going to be when they get on board?
Look, in one sense, perception is reality, right? I've traveled on United, I've traveled on Continental, I've traveled on Singapore Airlines. And for most customers, especially those traveling on long-haul flights, the small things matter. And it's the smallest things, the deviation, that actually hurts satisfaction the most. For instance, if you expect to find a United seat in Economy Plus, those extra 6 inches matters so much when you're on a 14-hour flight. Whereas if you're on a short flight, it really doesn't matter. Which is why low-cost airlines are a lot more successful in these short flights as opposed to trying to get onto the long-haul flights.
Well, if we come back to perceived value, again, you've got, say, the frequent flyer schemes. United makes great store of the fact that it's got a lot of very loyal passengers who carry one of its cards. Equally, so do Continental.
Yes.
But United equally say that if you get up to the elite tier levels of one of its frequent flyer schemes, fine, they'll see if they can upgrade you on each one of its flights.
Yeah.
Yet at the same point, you have much more profitable airlines, like, for example, as you were saying, Singapore Airlines, that say very explicitly, under no circumstances do they upgrade passengers, and they make most of their profits from business class passengers.
Absolutely.
So you've got sort of these two different models here. Are United or Continental likely to change?
Well, see, this is the key. Now, whenever you're looking for merger, you're looking for some synergy. The question is whether what underpins customer satisfaction among United Airlines customers is the same or different than what underpins the satisfaction of Continental. Continental is a great story. I mean, 10 years ago, they were in deep trouble, coming off of Chapter 11. What they decided is to move the value proposition upmarket. For them, it was about business class consolidation. And within 5 years, Continental was a great success story. Incredible number of awards in terms of most admired airlines in the US from a global marketplace. Singapore Airlines continues to be the top, but Continental made great strides because what they were doing was consolidating their value proposition in the higher end of the price spectrum, business class for instance, as opposed to United, where they were setting expectations that anytime there's a seat, we'll upgrade you. All of a sudden, the business class experience in United is not that special anymore, whereas in Singapore Airlines, if by chance you get upgraded, boy, you love that experience a lot more because you weren't expecting to get it. And therefore, the satisfaction that you would express with your experience at Singapore Airlines is much higher because you were not expecting that upgrade, whereas in United, because you're expecting it, your satisfaction is not that much greater. So United Airlines is really having to fight harder to raise its satisfaction, whereas Singapore doesn't have to fight that much harder.
And equally, if you look at passengers who are at the back of the plane, then on United, their experiences may say be flying across the Pacific, a 14-hour flight where all they get is a projection television at the front of the cabin, whereas they fly on other carriers, then suddenly they're going to get a little seat-back television and all these extra knickknacks. But do passengers who are buying the cheapest possible economy ticket actually have any idea when it comes to, say, just looking for the cheapest flight on Expedia?
But what low-cost airlines have been able to do is change the texture of consumer expectations. All of a sudden, airline passengers are likely to say, listen, if I can fly on the low-cost version of Singapore Airlines or the low-cost version of Qantas, and I'm getting all these, I'm getting a TV in front of my seat, why is it an airline, a legacy airline like United, can't do that? So what low-cost airlines have done is actually change the nature of the game, raised customer expectations relative to the price paid. And so even if I go on Expedia and I buy my ticket at the cheapest possible price, what consumers quickly forget is the price that they paid. What really matters to them is the experience relative to the price that they paid.
And how about the advertising that they see then? Because there are airlines, like for example Singapore Airlines, that will always advertise the quality of the service you get on board, whereas you see the adverts for, say, United, all they will do is just shout the price 3 times and the web address another 4 times. And again, do people pay much attention to this advertising? Is there actually much value that comes out of the spend?
Absolutely. I mean, look, this is an important question, right? What is advertising supposed to do? Does advertising simply make consumers aware of your product or service? Or does it also help set expectations about the quality that you're going to get? Both are important. You want consumers to be aware of your product or service. But if all you're doing is shouting out prices, then what you're getting among new customers is a very diverse set of customers. Some customers are perhaps your old, long-standing customers for whom price may not be that important. New customers are coming in with paying very low amounts of money. They're very price sensitive. But what that does is it changes the nature of your customer portfolio. What you get is a very diverse customer portfolio. Servicing all these different types of customers can actually, in the long term, be more expensive. Whereas if what you're servicing is a very narrow type of customer who wants high quality, it's actually easier and cheaper to service them because you're not spreading yourself thin, trying to make many different kinds of people happy while they're flying. So do advertising expenditures work? Absolutely. They help you grow the franchise. But advertisements that are geared towards quality and the value proposition, what they do is set expectations about which you can then deliver and reap the benefits of the satisfaction. Whereas if all you're doing is advertising on price, you're setting expectations about price, but you're not setting expectations about value because consumers still want all of these benefits on an airline despite paying low prices. So that's really where the conundrum lies with advertising. It works, but sometimes long-term effects could be deleterious.
Okay, so if we go back to the merger then between Continental and United, they've obviously now agreed in a very short amount of time to merge, and in fact you only have to look at the livery they've got for the merged planes, which have got the United name but the Continental logo. Surely that must be confusing their customers.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, for United customers, the U was a very important sort of brand marker. It talked about what airline they were flying, and it was an important dimension of the brand identity, so to speak. the time of this merger, the time that it's taken to get this merger through, is perhaps a little troubling from where I sit and from my research. Because what I think has suffered is due diligence in the customer side. And when I say due diligence, when 70% of mergers and acquisitions do not meet the intended objectives, you ask yourself the question, well, why not? And eventually it's about focusing on the types of customers that you're now going to get. The assumption is that we will have two different revenue streams, we'll put them together, we'll have the sum of those two revenues. On the cost side, we're going to save some money because of synergies, and we're going to therefore increase margins and give shareholders more money. But really what happens is when you don't do enough customer due diligence on the customer side, like United and Continental, which has so many different types of customers, what you're going to end up happening is the merged airline is going to now start seeing customers, perhaps from the Continental side, slowly moving to other airlines. So the assumption about the joint revenue no longer will hold. The cost savings may not obtain, and even if the cost savings obtain, they're going to come from cutting back on service, as a result of which customer satisfaction is going to go further down and long-term shareholder value is now going to suffer. And this is really the generative mechanism for why many mergers and acquisitions don't deliver on the promise, because having too many different kinds of customers long-term is actually a bad thing from the perspective of shareholder value.
And equally, if this merger was taking place even 10 years or so ago, it would have been played out in the newspapers and most people would have forgotten about it within a day or two. But now, people, particularly if they're looking for customer satisfaction, will go onto the online media, they'll go to social media forums, things like that, to discuss their own customer satisfaction. How important must that be for both Continental and United now, where they see their customers arguing, both of them, say, from their frequent flyer clubs, don't seem to want to join? How important is that for the airlines?
It's going to be very important, and I hope both of them are monitoring this. I hope both of them are looking at this from a due diligence perspective and saying, how can we, despite the fact that we've merged, maintain the service across the diverse set of customer segments? How can we prevent the Continental satisfaction scores? The American Customer Satisfaction Index is in the mid-70s, and has been that way for the last several years. United, on the other hand, in the last year has dipped about 20%. They're in the mid-50s. Now we're looking at two airlines spread by 20 points in the American Customer Satisfaction Index. How can they prevent those people at 74 dropping down to 56? And how can they take these 56 and move it up to 74? That's really the challenge. So I hope they're listening to customers. I hope they're tracking these sorts of blogs. And I hope that long-term, this actually works.
So finally, Murali, if you were chief executive of the combined entity of Continental and United, you were looking both at customer satisfaction and also shareholder value, what would you do?
Well, this is a tricky question. The first thing I'd say is try to ensure that you have two separate value delivery mentalities. Protect the high end and understand what drives satisfaction among Continental customers, what drives customer satisfaction among United customers, and make sure that you're delivering both sources of satisfaction. Short term, that might be a little bit more expensive, but long term, that's the route to shareholder value. Managing these multiple customer portfolios, or managing these multiple segments in the customer portfolio, is going to be important. But trying to have a one-size-fits-all model for this merged customer base and this merged entity is going to be perhaps the harbinger of bad news.
Certainly be fascinating to see how it pans out. Murali, thank you very much.
Thank you, Julian.
For more business news and analysis from Knowledge at the Australian School of Business, please visit knowledge.asb.unsw.edu.au.